Chris Ballard has no intention of letting Michael Pittman Jr. walk out that door this offseason. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers, you guys get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is 150 smackers if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. What up, y'all? The combine continued today. We got to hear from Colts GM Chris Ballard. We did not hear from head coach Shane Steichen. He's a little bit under the weather. So those of us in the media will hear from him next week at the Colts facility. So we'll bring you more on that when we get that discussion. But Zach and I spoke to several defensive players today as well. Players hit the stage to get their media availability in. So we're going to tell you what Chris Ballard said factually. We're going to tell you some things where we're reading between the lines, breadcrumbs he can't really give details about, but things that we're kind of reading about it. And then we're going to give you some of the things that we heard from some of the players that were out there today as well. So let's get into what Ballard said. Health is obviously the most paramount thing that tends to influence your season. So there was some injury news and notes to mention. Right tackle Braden Smith, who was plagued by various injuries all throughout the season. Ballard said that he did have a procedure on his knee, a knee that gave him problems all throughout the year. So that's good. He had a cleanup. Jonathan Taylor, nothing to do on that. He's good. He didn't have any procedures. Julian Blackmon was good as well. Anthony Richardson, when we spoke to him following the season, he said that he hoped to be throwing in February. We have since seen videos that he is. Chris Ballard acknowledged that. He said they're very happy with where he's at. And although Anthony Richardson, of course, he's a competitor, he wants to push through it and wants to be ahead of the rehab. Chris Ballard basically said, I just barely survived getting through this Andrew Luck thing. He said the last one. And they want to take it slow and they want to do it right with Richardson. They don't want any hiccups. They don't want any setbacks. They want their quarterback to be 100% pristine and ready to go when he gets out there.
Yep.
So what did you think? I mean, primarily about the injury news, because not much news is good news.
Yeah, I mean, it's good that Jonathan Taylor is healthy going into this offseason. So that means we don't have this whole offseason of speculation about his injuries and stuff. Obviously, Braden Smith getting that knee procedure after a very, very tough season with the knee. I mean, he didn't even finish that final game of the year, and he was playing outstanding in that final game. He just couldn't go anymore in that last game against the Houston Texans. So good to get him that procedure. Anthony Richardson, big thing that Chris Ballard mentioned was just not rushing this process. Richardson has said a couple of times it's good to stay ahead of the process and be ahead of the curve a little bit. But Ballard said, well, it's good for us on this end to listen to the doctors and make sure he's not going too hard, because like the last one, you just don't want to push it too much and re-injure what's going on. So I think they're going to be a lot safer with this one because the last one was a mess. But I think this is a good thing here. Going to the big news, though, from Chris Ballard's press conference. And this wasn't said in the live streamed press conference. This was said off to the side with the local media guys. But I don't know who asked it. Do you remember who asked the question?
Oh, God, I forget. I think it was probably Nate or someone.
Yeah, someone basically asked the question, like, where do you see Michael Pittman Jr. being in September? Do you see him being with the Colts? And Ballard basically said yes. Like he said definitively, he said yes. So Michael Pittman Jr. should be with the Colts in September. I mean, look, I don't think this was ever really in question. We haven't seen a receiver of Pittman Jr.'s caliber and age hit the free agent market in a long, long time. So I never thought it was really questioned, but Chris Ballard basically confirmed it today. Michael Pittman Jr. will be back with the Colts next year. He did talk about them working on a long-term deal. He said that Pittman Jr.'s agent has been around for a long time, does some really good things around the league. So good relationship with that agent. I'd expect a long-term deal to get done, but we'll see. But it does look like Michael Pittman Jr., whether it's the franchise tag, the transition tag, or a long-term deal, will be with the Colts this upcoming September.
Yeah, that's definitely great news. It was asked. There were so many different ways it was asked before, and it was actually Chap that asked.
Chap, okay.
Ballard was asked about the franchise tag. He was asked about, working out a long-term deal, and he acknowledged they have been having talks with the agent. But then Chap at the end said, is Michael Pittman Jr. going to be with the Colts in September? And Ballard said yes.
Yeah.
He has no intention of letting him get out there. So whether it's the franchise tag or a long-term deal, Pittman ain't going nowhere. He's not getting traded. Even if he demands a trade, we've seen how that goes with Jonathan Taylor last year.
Yep.
So no, I think if they use the franchise tag, they're going to do it right. They have every intention of working on a long-term deal. If the tag is used, it will only be to buy time because they want number 11 in town for the long haul.
Yeah, which is a good thing. Look, you don't find receivers capable of averaging 1,000 yards a year over a 3-year span. They don't just grow on trees. Right. I mean, look, before Pittman Jr., it was T.Y. Hilton. Before T.Y., it was Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison. But besides those guys, it's not like they have like a litany of dudes who are averaging 1,000 yards a year for them. So, you want to keep those guys in house. You want them to be franchise legends and stuff. And I think Pittman Jr. feels the same way. So Pittman Jr. will be back with the Colts. And again, I think it's going to be a long-term deal rather than just the franchise tag with that. Another big piece of news here is we've had a lot of talk this draft season about this being a very weak draft because NIL has killed the draft. There's no depth on day 3. Jim Nagy, transfer portal, NIL. Jim Nagy of the Senior Bowl director said that, look, there's no depth in this draft because of that. I know the Shrine Game had to pull a lot of guys from the Tropical Bowl and the Hula Bowl to fill their roster too. But Chris Ballard doesn't seem to care about that whatsoever. Chris Ballard is saying, no. These players are just older. They're not, there's not like there's no depth. We just have guys coming in here that are like 24, 25, into this draft. Doesn't mean there's no depth. So guys, for all you guys out there that are thinking, what's Chris Ballard going to do on day 3? Don't worry. He will find some guys from Cal Polytech playing linebacker or offensive tackle, and somehow they'll be starters on this team by year 2 or year 3. But Chris Ballard, in typical Chris Ballard fashion, likes the depth in this draft. And, he just says it's just more seniors and older players, which I think if you look at his average draft age over the course of his career, it's probably like 23, 24 at this point now.
Yeah, he's not worried about the older guys taking them on day 3. Like he wants the younger upside guys early on, sure, but you get these Abilene Christians and the Samford College, Malone, like all these guys, like, and it was my question. I asked him because I was particularly interested in hearing him about that because Nagy said, NIL and the transfer portal and everything, players have more options now. They don't have to go to the NFL, and so with day 3 of the draft, it's the depth just isn't there, or it's weaker. And I basically put it to Ballard, like, do you agree with that? And like, your guys' draft board is shrinking this year, or is it that's a challenge for you? You need to you're looking for those diamonds in the rough, essentially. And he's very much looking at it as getting those EJ Speeds, getting the Titus Leo type guys. Like, expect some small school older guys on day 3. I mean, and those older guys, Ballard later went to say, he's like, those guys have played a lot, and they can play good football, and maybe they come from small schools, but they could be better ready to play when they get to the NFL.
Yep. So Colts fans, drop your guess in the comments below. Which is a player that I have never heard of that the Colts are going to draft on day 3? If you get it, you win a hug from me in person, a hug from
me. Right
so
out there?
I will fly right out there. Just don't live in like Alaska or anything like that. Philippe, don't comment. Philippe Costa, do not comment.
You can go out to Brazil.
One more thing that Chris Ballard did mention as well is he linked this wide receiver class to being as good as the great 2020 wide receiver class, right? Yeah, 2020 that had Michael Pittman Jr., CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins. Fantastic wide receiver class in 2020. He said that this class is just as good, if not better. This year, he really likes the wide receiver class from top to bottom. Several elite guys, very good depth. He's really high on this wide receiver class, and we're going to save the speculation for segment 2. Yes. But I think that spells good things for the Colts this year.
Absolutely, it does, because that just goes to show wide receiver is a popular wide receiver pass catcher is a popular topic for Colts fans right now to want or in the first couple rounds, and to hear your GM say like, yeah, that's a really good stacked class this year, and it's We know the Colts want to get more explosive, but not going to give too much that way. We'll talk about that here in a second. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers, like I told you, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $150 back if your bet wins. So bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. The NFL is done for now, but, there's still plenty of NBA going on. You're about to start getting into the thick of the playoff races. Place your wager on whatever awards Tyrese Halliburton is going to win because, we know Guy is going for something there. So go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
And this show is also sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in the day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? See, that's what I would do right there. Would you read a book? Would you show up for a friend? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. I know a lot of you guys are like me, you're married, you have families, you have, an awesome little dog at home and stuff like that. Those are things that matter to me. And therapy has always been a great way in my life to just prioritize those things. For me, working 3 jobs, to take that step back and say, look, I care about this little dog. This little dog is the greatest thing I've ever had in my life. My wife's pretty cool too. So I need to prioritize those things. And therapy's always been great for me. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Jake, now we're getting into the fun part of today's episode. We're doing the speculation based off what Ballard said. Can we read between the lines? Lines, not lions. I think that's a popular PBS show there. Read between the lines of what Chris Ballard said. And I think you had a really big one here that I'm sure Colts fans will be intrigued by. And this involves the hero of last season, the Pro Bowler from last season. Jake, what are the vibes you're getting on Gardner Minshew potentially coming back to the Colts or not coming back to the Colts?
Yeah, Gardner Minshew. And again, let me preface this. This segment is all about things Zach and I are the vibes we're getting off what Ballard said, not what he said directly.
Yeah.
So leading off this first one with Gardner Minshew, Ballard was asked if Minshew will be back, if they want him back as the backup. He was also asked an interesting question. This one, I think, was Nate or Joel, one of the two. Do you want your backup quarterback to be a little more stylistically like Anthony Richardson so the offense doesn't change so drastically?
Love that
if
question.
Richardson goes down.
Love that question so much.
And, we heard Ballard really heap praise on Michael Pittman Jr. They said they want him back. He heaped praise on Kenny Moore, said they want him back. And just the way that he spoke about Gardner, it sounded more like a thank you for the memories type thing. It was more, we appreciate what he did for the team. We love his toughness and competitiveness. But when you get down to it, I mean, he was signed for $3.5 million with the Colts, and he outplayed that. Mm-hmm. He played significantly more than what would have been planned. He nearly helped lead the Colts to the playoffs. And the validity of the Pro Bowl or not, that goes on his resume. That is a bargaining chip for his agent.
Yeah.
So Minshew's price went up drastically. I would say it probably more than doubled at the $3.5 million mark. So football is a business. Like the number I don't think they totally don't want Minshew. I think they want him to a financial limit. And my guess is he maybe played out of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I don't disagree. I mean, I think one name to really keep an eye on is Tyrod Taylor from the New York Giants. Stylistically, makes a lot of sense. Also played under Shane Steichen with the Los Angeles Chargers. Does make a ton of sense. But we'll see what the Colts do there at backup quarterback. Another interesting note is when I was present for the more like the recorded version of the press conference, the one that you guys saw streamed on social medias and stuff. When Chris Ballard talked about Kenny Moore II, it seemed like, to me at least, hey, we're going to let him hit the market. We're going to see what the price tag is, but we'd love to have him back. Mm-hmm. Now, you got a slightly different vibe, I think, when you were talking with Ballard off to the side. Like, it does seem like they really want Kenny Moore II back. And honestly, I don't know any reason why not to bring him back, especially with how young and inexperienced his cornerback room is.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like one where it would get wrapped up before free agency starts. Again, I think they want him back, and he basically put it like, we want him back, but we'll see how it plays out, which to me means that he's going to probably go on the market. And what the Colts like to do with their priority free agents, they say, go out there, see what teams want you for, and come back to us, give us the opportunity to match or, counter in some way. And it sounds like that's probably what it's going to be. Like, Kenny deserves to hit free agency and see what's out there, but I think the Colts, as long as it's financially viable, makes sense, want him back. I mean, they were intentional about getting young in the secondary, but that didn't mean everybody, and they need some veteran leaders. And Chris Ballard really, again, he heaped praise on Kenny Moore for his performance and leadership. And, they want to keep going with the secondary with him as a part of it, because you guys will see, I spliced together the podium session and the side session. They're going to be going up here after a bit. But he said he's a nickel, but his role is very, very critical, basically. So Kenny Moore is a big part of what they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. And one more big thing we need to talk about in our speculation segment on today's show is the talk about wide receiver. Now, Chris Ballard hyped on how big wide receiver is in this class, just how deep it is, how talented it is, how special it is. And he did say off to the side, I believe our good friend Nate Atkins of the Indy Star tweeted out there that he kind of has a position in mind for his first round pick. Now, he didn't say wide receiver, but Jake, are you with me where you're kind of thinking like, look, he's kind of hinting at pass catcher or wide receiver with that first pick. Like, again, I'm not saying Chris Ballard is easy to read as a GM, but I'm not saying he's not easy to read at times when it comes to stuff like this. I feel like he was hinting a lot at wide receiver / pass catcher with that first round pick there at 15, or whether it's a trade back or 15, whatever. I think he was kind of hinting at wide receiver with that first round pick.
I think that's fair. And you could throw pass catcher in general, the tight end, Brock Bowers as well. I think using context clues, when he talked about cornerbacks, I felt like he mentioned the depth players more and liking the guys they have, which doesn't mean they're not going to add guys, but there's an element of, they went young and they want to give some of these guys a chance. But we didn't really hear that as much at receiver. He did say that Ashton Dulin was a huge loss, but a lot of that was special teams.
Yep.
So I think he was quicker to praise what they have at cornerback than what they have at receiver. And so using all that and talking so highly about the receiver group, and in January when we talked to them, they talked about getting more explosive on offense. Yeah. Receiver or tight end if it's Brock Bowers. I'm just going to start throwing. We mean Brock Bowers as well if we say receiver in the first round, essentially. So anything like that, I think that's the vibe.
Yeah. No, I think the most Chris Ballard thing I can think of in the first round is being there at 15. Bowers is gone. Maybe like a Cooper DeJean is gone too. So there's just not that tempting aspect at corner. And they're sitting there with Brian Thomas on the board. They got Xavier Legette on the board, Keon Coleman on the board, all these guys that fit the Chris Ballard mold that he could take in round one. And he says, you know what? Let me get back to pick 21 or 22, and whoever falls to me there is who I'm going to take. I know you guys hate it, but that is the most Chris Ballard thing ever. He gets his receiver round one, but he also collects some picks so he can get some little sisters of the poor tight end there on day 3. But you guys let us know in the comment section, do you think Chris Ballard is hinting at wide receiver in round one? You're going to let us know right there. Coming up, we're going to talk about some players that we talked to today in the media session availability.
Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors is everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and much more things I know nothing about, Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or it's your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so before we got to talk to Chris Ballard today, it was time to talk to the big nasties, the big hog mollies. We talked to some defensive linemen today. I spoke with Dallas Turner and Braden Fisk specifically. It's a couple guys that I think would fit pretty well with the Colts. Turner can probably be a polarizing pick, I guess you could say, because receiver and corner are much more sexier selections at 15. But if you get the premier edge rusher in the draft falling into your lap at 15, when you normally would have to take them at 5 or 10 or something,
yeah,
do you do it? So I spoke to him. Braden Fisk is a guy who stood out at the Senior Bowl, would play, probably would play a similar role to Taven Bryan, hopefully at a higher level moving forward. But no, you had kind of a laundry list of edge guys you talked to today too.
Yeah. We'll finish this segment up talking about Fisk because I think he's a great fit for Indy and just his vibes are great.
Yeah.
His being a local kid is great. We'll talk about him to close out this segment. But first off, I want to shout out Ohio State linebacker Steel Chambers. What a fun and just
great
goofy
name.
dude. Yeah. So Steel Chambers, right? Steel Chambers, you're getting this linebacker that, great name already, played Ohio State, has a lot of cool vibes about him. Comes into the event and just has a lot of fun in his media session. He's kind of shooting down all the who you met with questions, which we love because, they're kind of goofy questions. I get why people go into them, but they're kind of goofy. And then he asked all the media people around him, who are the 4 animals you're bringing into a fight against me and my 4 animals? And mentions that he could beat up a kangaroo in a fight and stuff. Just a really fun interview. I know it's not really anything you're gaining from the interview, but Steel Chambers too. If you look him up too, he's got like a Fu Manchu mustache online. Like really, really, really fun guy. That's all I really had to say about him. I didn't really talk much football with him. I just kind of stopped by and he was having a blast over there. Jalix Hunt, linebacker. He was at the Senior Bowl, played some off ball, did some edge work at college there from an HBCU college too, which is great to see that representation. But really great length, really good mover. Didn't have the greatest Senior Bowl week, but just the guy who really checks off a lot of Chris Ballard check boxes there and could be a day 3 guy. And then I just nerded out with 3 dudes that I enjoy talking ball with. Trajan Jeffcoat, Arkansas edge rusher, Miles Cole, Texas Tech edge rusher, and Nelson Caesar, edge rusher from Houston. Now, Nelson Caesar probably goes the highest out of these guys. He had like nearly 10 sacks last year in his junior season for Houston. Very productive player, powerful player. But I really talked about I talked with these 3 guys about their pass rush plan, their plan of attack, how they study opposing offensive tackles, and really got some good insight there. So you can go over to horseshoehuddle.com and see what those guys had to say to me. I would say Jeffcoat and Cole both have the length and the athleticism that fit the Colts really well. Caesar's a little bit undersized, but he could fit as well with a great combine. So check out those interviews there over at horseshoehuddle.com. But I do think the big interview of the day was Braden Fisk from Florida State. Local kid, had a really good interview here. And you said that he talked with the Colts and also that, when it came to you asking how he'd feel to play for Indy, his local hometown team, he gave a really good interview.
Yeah, so he had mentioned someone that the Colts were one of the teams he met with, and I was like, what were the vibes you got off of that hometown team? Because he is from the region. He's from Northwest Indiana, Michigan City. And so he said he grew up a huge Colts fan, is still a very big Colts fan, got goosebumps going into Lucas Oil Stadium, mentioned growing up watching Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis, and said it would be awesome to play here with the Colts. But that's a guy, like, he keeps checking off boxes for me. Like, there are some guys who are just bad interviews, but they're not bad guys. But like, he's got everything, man. Like,
yeah,
he's like, what, 6'3", 300 pounds. I think he's got interior flexibility. He himself said he's probably more of a 3 tech, but like we've seen with the Colts, they be willing to probably move him to both spots inside. But he's very athletic. He's got a high motor. Again, kept making plays at the Senior Bowl, was living in the backfield. And he's a really fun-loving guy. I think he would fit into the locker room great. And again, I mentioned a specific replacement and Taven Bryan, who's a free agent. Maybe that's a guy who could give you a slight boost behind the starters on the defensive line.
Yeah, Jake, are you telling me we have a guy in this class who's an Indy local, stood out at the Senior Bowl, fits a positional need that the Colts have, and he's really athletic?
I think so.
This kind of reminds me of a Juju Brents player from I don't know.
Hey.
I'm just saying here, but yeah, I think Braden Fisk is going to be a favorite of ours this draft season here and a great fit for the Indianapolis Colts. I think that's all we have for today, guys, though. We didn't really talk to too many players. Tomorrow is going to be a bigger day for us, talking defensive backs and tight ends. So we'll get you guys content on Brock Bowers, on a lot of these corners and safeties as well. All big needs for the Indianapolis Colts. So it should be a busy day there. And then Friday, we'll have, quarterbacks, which I know you guys are not crazy about. We don't need to talk quarterbacks, but we'll also have wide receivers and running backs on Friday. So really, really fun media sessions, workout numbers for defensive linemen tomorrow as well. So busy day that we will bring to you guys on tomorrow's show. Before we go, though, the Indy Draft Guides pre-orders are now open for $8.99 and code DRAFTMISS. You get access to an essential piece of reading for Colts fans both before and after the draft, featuring 225 plus in-depth scouting reports, features, and much more. Click the link in our show notes to pre-order today. Look, guys, if you want to get all the in-depth information on the Cal Polytech linebacker that Chris Ballard is going to take in round 3, this is where you want to go. We're going to have all the scouting reports on Cal Polytech, Holy Cross University. We're going to have all of them in here. So make sure you're going to get your Indy Draft Guide. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks 2 on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll see you guys back here in the beautiful afternoon from Indianapolis.